This is our class on the history of Christmas, and today is the first Sunday of Advent, so it's the first week of our class as well. So what I want to go over this week is just sort of some of the goals of the course and the theoretical frameworks that we're going to use to talk about the history of Christmas, the history of holidays, the history of celebrations, actually a big area in sociology, in history, and several other fields as well. So we just want to have that background so that we know what we're talking about. So that's what we'll be looking at this week. Okay, so first of all, I'd just like to kick us off with some discussion, and I'm going to rely on the people in the room here a little bit. Why do this? Why are we here? Why would we study the history of Christmas? What's the point? What's the so what? Any thoughts on why we would even want to be here at 9 o'clock on a relatively chilly morning?
Well, there are many groups of people that have from different cultures that have different customs that all seem to boil together at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no one celebration. There are multiple. It's nice to know why there are so many and not just one.
Makes sense. Jack, can folks on the live stream hear what people in the class are saying?
Oh, yes,
Do I need to
yes,
repeat?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Great to know where all of these various traditions and customs and celebrations and perspectives come from. Any other thoughts on why we might study the history of Christmas? Why would we even be here? I can wait. I've taught first-year college students. They really don't like to talk. Why are you here? Let's make it more specific. Yeah.
Just to hear about what you have to say.
Okay.
Why we do what we do.
Why we
to
do what we do.
celebrate Christmas.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Why did you get up and come here this morning, aside from sense of obligation that you should be in Sunday school?
I'll be honest, I saw this on my smartwatch when I was parking the car, and I thought, very good topic. I thought, that's very interesting.
Good. Yeah, that's what we like to hear. Any other thoughts? Why we might study the history of Christmas?
Take it away from all the shopping and the way we celebrate Christmas now.
Okay.
So let's take it back to the
Take
real
it
reason.
back. Take it back. We're gonna get to that. Probably the fourth week will be Christmas and commerce. Okay. Well, I think I've put you on the spot enough. But keep thinking about that. Keep thinking. Always think whenever we're studying anything. Why are we doing it? Why are we here? That's one of the things. The sort of stereotypes that I fight constantly as a historian is, the idea that it doesn't matter, the idea that history's in the past, and it doesn't mean anything to us, because it does mean a lot to us, I think, and I hope you, if you don't agree with me already, will agree with me by the end of the course. Okay, so I want to talk about, and this is a little bit of that theoretical framework that we talked about ahead of time, the functions of holidays, like why we celebrate holidays at all. So, sociologist Amitai Etzioni says that there are two sort of functions of holidays. One is recommitment holiday, the other is tension management. So what are some examples that you can think of as, either a recommitment holiday, a tension management holiday? And when we talk about tension management, we're not necessarily talking about just our personal tension management, our personal, let's let off some steam. We're talking about, as a society, letting off steam, tension management. Here's my co-host today. He'll provide us with some comments from the Peanut Gallery.
What I do best.
I'm I'm the smart one. Okay. So examples of these. What are some examples you can think of recommitment holidays, either to a religious or a national ideal, or tension management holidays? And some of them are going to overlap. You're going to have both.
Where would you put July 4th? Tension management, recommitment, or both?
Recommitment.
I think right now both.
Yeah, and maybe it started as recommitment. You're honoring this, declaration, all this stuff. But now a lot of times it's go out on the boat, have a watermelon, just have a big party. So it starts one way and begins to meld into both. Where would you put Halloween?
Not at all.
That's not a holiday. I'm sorry.
But it is. So
Probably
Hol-
tension management.
yeah, it's a
Blow off
chance.
steam.
Low steam, you're getting candy. So holidays aren't. No one gets to define a holiday what it is. It's the culture kind of creates it. So the government can declare something a holiday, but if no one celebrates it, is it a holiday? Who's to say? And if no one said, here's just a holiday, but everybody's celebrating something at the same time, is it a holiday? So Halloween is one of those tension management. You get to dress up, go get candy. Some people just go and they have weird parties and have weird costumes and all that kind of stuff. It's just a chance to blow off steam. So you have these different kinds of holidays. Over time, we celebrate through the year. Sometimes Hallmark makes them up to sell cars. People don't get too excited about Grandparents' Day, but it's there. So we have all these different kinds of holidays.
Stephen, I think, Jack, you can tell me, can we see him better if he's over on that side?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to be in front of the.
Well, stand on the other side
No,
of the
no,
screen.
maybe not in the screen, but if you were fairly together there, it would
I'll
work.
just stay next to you.
Okay, grab
Yeah, that'll work.
You can use that.
Oh, we have a second mic.
The second mic, yes.
Let me take off this mic. Anyway.
They've given us 2 mics. Okay, so what about Memorial Day?
Recommitment.
Okay. Any other examples we can think of? Thanksgiving, we just celebrated Thanksgiving.
Maybe both.
Both? Yeah? Where do you see the different elements of that in say, Thanksgiving?
Family gatherings.
Uh-huh.
Coming together with your family.
Yeah, recommitment to the family. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that we have that holidays tend to serve these 2 functions for us as a society: tension management or recommitment. Okay, so Bruce David Forbes is the professor of religious studies and co-editor of Religion and Popular Culture in America. He has these 2 books, which are really great, and I highly recommend. We do have the second one, Christmas: A Candid History, in the church library, if you want to check it out. They're really great sort of layperson's look at how we got a lot of our favorite holidays, and I've used a lot of his frameworks as I've been designing this, so I want to make sure to give credit where credit is due. And the first thing I want to talk about is the holiday 3-layer cake.
I like cake.
So Forbes says that holidays developed, and we can, and that we can look at many different holidays as having these same 3 parts. So kind of at the bottom here, we have our seasonal celebration that's in some way this holiday is connected to the seasons. Then we have our second layer, which is our religious or national overlay, where either it's religious commitment, it's national commitment, something like that. And then we have at the top what we've added on in our modern popular culture. So something like even Memorial Day, and I may talk about Memorial Day a lot because I studied it pretty extensively. So even that is a seasonal celebration. It comes from the reason we have Memorial Day when it is because of when the flowers bloom, when you can decorate graves. As it developed post-Civil War, it actually, the further north you would go, the later Memorial Day would be set, because the flowers would bloom later. So it was whenever the flowers would bloom. But we can certainly see this, I think, in Christmas, and today we're going to talk about Christmas as a seasonal celebration. And why is it this time of year? Because, you know, we don't know when Jesus was born. I don't think.
We do not.
We do not know when
I did a whole class on
Jesus
that
was
last
born. And one thing I just want to talk about when it comes to history is we don't know a lot more than we do know. A lot of times people think, oh, history is like it's just a bunch of facts. It's super easy. Not true. You know, there's a lot we don't know. So let's keep going.
I feel we could have gone with a 3-layer trifle too. You know,
Okay,
or 4-layer
well.
trifle. Then you have to clearly define layers. Because different cakes you can't see when they're frosted all the same. You don't know what
It's
that
not a
is
real
layer.
cake. It's not a
Just
real
saying.
cake. Okay. He's here for the humor. So keep your attention while I'm droning on. Okay, so check out this. It's supposed to play a little bit. Oh, well. This picture. Think about it. Imagine yourself in it. I'm going to give you a minute to do that.
Makes me feel cold.
Sounds isolated.
Okay.
So what did that image make you think of? When you kind of imagine yourself there, what are you thinking about?
Skiing.
Skiing?
Yeah.
What's that?
Being cold.
Being cold? Yeah. How does it make you feel?
Magical.
Magical? What else? Imagine if you were in that scene with the fog and the mist and mountains for a year. Exactly like that.
That would get heavy.
Get heavy?
That would get heavy, yeah.
Get heavy, yeah. Get kind of depressing after a while. Sometimes those moments are magical. You see it and it's like, oh. But imagine staying there. So one of our favorite books is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And Courtney read it to Verity before he went to Ireland. And in there, you know, it's this idea, because the White Witch has made Narnia always winter, but never Christmas. Imagine what would it mean for it to be always winter and never Christmas. So you're always in that scene, and you never have the celebration. How would that be?
Not good. Not worth it. No good.
Not worth it. No good. Depressed. If you're in that for too long, as Charlie said, it gets heavy. How many of you go somewhere in the winter that's warmer? A few. I know a lot of people go for the entire winter. They're not here. Or at least they need a little vacation because, like, I can't do that for 3 whole months or 4 whole months. Which is why people started having celebrations to have some sort of, give us something here in the midst of all of that.
Yeah, Forbes says that walking into winter is a little like walking into death and hoping you're going to come out on the other side. And I think that it's hard for us to understand now in our modern context, even what people say 250, 300 years ago went through in the winter when you're dealing with the fact that you don't have central heating. It's something I think about a lot. I think about people wake up in the morning and break the ice on their basin to wash their face. You know, think about the snow sifting in onto your comforter, onto your bed while you're asleep. I just read a scene from Louisa May Alcott that talked about that.
No easy lights. You have to light your candles, but you have to conserve your candles because you don't have unlimited supplies. So you can't just flip lights on, and it gets dark pretty early these days. And that's depressing amongst itself. Just it gets dark. There's not light. There can be cold. You need something to brighten that time.
So winter is hard, is what we're saying. We drove that point home. Okay. Okay, So there are two major pre-Christian midwinter festivals that we're going to talk about here. And these took place all over Central and Northern Europe around the time of the winter solstice. And they mostly included some combination of lights, evergreens, feast, gatherings, drinking, dancing, and gifts.
Sounds fun. One of my favorite TV shows, as you've heard before, is Doctor Who. And there's one episode in which the doctor's on another planet, and he kind of says, on every world and every galaxy, at this time of year, people have to come together and say, we're halfway out of the dark. Congratulations. You know, and that's why it's kind of right after that longest night. You need something that says, it's going to get better. And you have lights, and you have cheer. That's why I love driving around and see all the Christmas lights up as it gets darker. At least there's something to make the earlier darker nights better. So all these different festivals, and it's not just in Europe, all over the world, we're focused on Europe, but everywhere have these halfway out of the dark times of celebration.
But the ones that we really draw from in our modern celebration of Christmas are the ones that took place in Europe. And when you think about Central and Northern Europe, I mean, we think it gets dark here. If you're way up in, you know, even England, Scotland, Ireland, it's dark there a lot earlier because they're much closer, you know, to the poles. If you're going on up into Norway and Finland and that area, you may have 3 or 4 hours of solid daylight, you know, but maybe not much else. Okay, so our two sort of major pre-Christian celebrations are Yule in the Nordic and Germanic areas, and then the Saturnalia in the Mediterranean areas around the Roman Empire. Okay, so Germany, Scandinavia, the British Isles, that area, and the word Yule may mean, we don't know, wheel, feast, or sacrifice, or some combination of all of those. Why would we think about wheels, feast, and sacrifices at this time of year?
Wheel in the sense of cycle, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, feast would be the celebration part that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
A lot of times they butcher a lot of the animals in the early winter because they didn't want to try to feed them through the winter. So you're kind of sacrificing that. Sometimes the times you'd have really the only fresh meat for several months. So you're going to have a big feast. They didn't have freezers. You can't put 58 pounds of venison in a freezer back then. So you'd eat a lot of it. You'd have a party. With Yule, what they do is they burn, in the Scandinavia, it had this log where we get our Yule log cakes, which I find delicious and one of my favorite things. They would burn it, and they would feast until the log burned down. So you have to find like a really good hardwood, and that allows you to feast for a really long time. They believed every spark off the log represented a new calf or pig that would be born in the coming year.
Okay, so slaughter of animals is a big one, as far as we're talking about things that they did at Yule drinking. Because think about drinking. It's not necessarily just to get drunk. It warms you up for one thing. And also in a lot of cases, a lot of these places, your water's not real safe. So you're going to be
Drinking the mead.
Drinking the mead, yep. And other things that are killing the bacteria. Not that they knew that was necessarily why, but they knew a lot more than we give them credit for, though. The bonfires, the Yule log, ghost stories as well. And then the prickly evergreens hung around your windows and doors to keep away the evil spirits.
Now, how much do you think Dickens was inspired a little bit by the idea of Yule, because it was in the British Isles and Scandinavia, when he chose a ghost story to kind of tell and create his version of Christmas? Are you going to get into that later in the class?
Not in detail, so you can go right ahead.
Why? The thing about it, the most popular Christmas story in a lot of ways is a ghost story. But we don't often associate ghost stories in Christmas. except for those spirits. There's a new version of it out on Apple, a show with Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell called Spirited. It's a musical celebration based on Dickens. I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah, I actually have a whole anthology of Christmas ghost stories. So it's a why might we think of ghosts at this time of year? Why do we think of ghosts at Halloween? You want to talk about thin places, thin times?
Well, Halloween's a whole holiday based on like Celtic Samhain and the idea of thin places at certain times of year when you have these kind of spirits being able to cross over. And maybe for Christmas Yule, when it's dark, becoming light, it's a transition time. And you can think of being kind of thin place where those from the past dead can kind of come back into this world, their memories. And also, I think as you get more towards Christmas, you're remembering, it becomes this holiday remembrance. You're remembering past memories of Christmas from your childhood, and those memories come back of your grandmother, of your great-grandmother, baking donuts in the kitchen on a Christmas morning. All that starts coming back. Christmas is tied to so much memory at this point, and ghosts really are about memory and reminder.
And it's also as you enter the deepness of winter, you're dealing with the fear of darkness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the truth is in the real world of the woods, night is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You have no way to know when you're going to be attacked. And so, yeah, the ghosts are a natural extension of that.
Yeah, it's a way of dealing with fear, you know,
Yeah.
because it can be a scary time, for sure. Okay, and then we have Saturnalia, which is a little bit peppier, I think. Possibly because it was observed further south, in southern Europe and around the Roman Empire. Late harvest festival, lasting 3 to 7 days around that time period, just before Christmas, December 17th to 23rd, roughly. So, look at this. So, this was your wild, drunken, unrestrained partying time.
The frat house thing.
Yes, that was, you know, think of your Roman Empire, you know, the,
Oh, God.
candles and fires, greenery, feast, gifts, social gatherings, all of that. So all those things that we see. But I want you to keep in mind this top one, the unrestrained partying, because that does become, excuse me, an issue later on as Christmas develops into what it is today.
So you had the Romans had Saturnalia, and then they had Juvenalia afterwards, which was like a celebration of children. And the rich people would often celebrate the cult of Mithras. And there's a whole idea that the idea of Mithras was born on December 25th, and so you have a celebration for children around the birth of a god, the sun god, on the 25th. And so there are some theories that the reason we celebrate Christmas on the 25th comes from this Juvenalia time, the cult of Mithras, having an already existing party that's a little bit less crazy than this one on the 25th. There's lots of other reasons people believe we celebrate it on the 25th. There's no one
Don't
right
know.
answer.
Again, it's one of those we don't know. And it may be that many of those answers are right, you know, but it comes from a variety of sources. Okay, so sometimes we talk about the pagan roots of Christmas. I invariably hear this this time of year. And so pagan, long been a word used by Christians to refer to things that are or were non-Christian or pre-Christian. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. So there's some ongoing controversies with this. So I will see, again, invariably, some Christians get really upset every year about the association with any quote-unquote pagan or secular practices. They're either encouraging Christians not to celebrate at all because it's not biblical, or to purify the holiday, to strip it of its quote-unquote pagan roots and pagan practices, anything that comes from
you want to get technical, the idea of celebrating Christmas isn't even biblical at all. None of the early Christians celebrated
We talked about
Christmas. Okay, fine. It's a teaser. A teaser.
Okay. So I see this happen a lot. I'm sure you can think of many examples. Sometimes Christians will attempt to reimagine the roots of certain of these midwinter traditions, because let's be honest, we like our midwinter traditions. I'm a person who's very able to like kind of take it all in and be fine with all the controversies and the tensions and all of that. Some people do not like that. They're not, don't want to do that. So they'll really like certain elements of Christmas, but they need it to be Christian. They need it to be somehow, they need to somehow force it in, kind of wedge it in to make it that way. So this often leads us to legends like, I don't know if you've heard the one about Martin Luther and the first Christmas tree, how they try to make it a Luther thing, where like Luther is walking through the forest and he's lost and the stars are guiding him home because they're on the trees, and that's how he makes it home. And so then he's like, oh, Jesus guided me home, so now I'm gonna have a tree for
There's
Jesus.
a star on it in my house.
Yeah, that's not true. That's not in any way where we get the Christmas tree thing. And that leads us to a lot of historical misunderstandings as we try to see people trying to force it, really, trying to force it in.
One of my favorite things about doing Christmas traditions comes from the Disney Frozen Holiday Special. It's great.
It is
It's
great. You
short,
should watch it. It's
but
really funny.
Olaf the Snowman wants to find some tradition that'll help Elsa and Anna feel like a family. Just going around asking everybody their traditions. And to this like naive snowman is just kind of funny, whether it's, you know, hanging socks by the fire for somebody to come down and put something in while the fire's still going. He's like, that seems safe. Or like the Christmas tree, he's like, oh, you cut down a tree and decorate his corpse with candles? Sounds great. But it's kind of funny, look at all these different traditions and why and how they might seem. If you have no idea why, what it would seem like to an outsider. And it's in the form of a fun song. So if you have Disney Plus, check out the Frozen Holiday Special. I get 10% of all new Disney Plus subscriptions. Product placement.
Okay, so from another perspective, we often do see non-Christians who are tired of the Christian cultural dominance and will try to kind of find any way to kick at it. And they'll sometimes enjoy highlighting the non or pre-Christian roots of the holiday, either in an attempt to center their own beliefs or to just make Christians kind of squirm a little bit. So we see that sort of coming from both sides, and I should say all sides really, because it's not like there are two perspectives. It's more like a circle. There are probably as many different perspectives on Christmas as there are people in this room. Here.
I know Muslims who celebrate Christmas, Jews who celebrate Christmas, Christians who celebrate Christmas but never go to church. You know, there's this whole kind of line in church called the Creasters. People who come to church at Christmas and Easter, so they're called Creasters. I remember my old church one time, we were talking about Creasters, and the church secretary was like, I don't know that name. Are they on our rolls?
Yeah, so this is sort of my understanding of that. I don't find either of those approaches especially helpful. Either for understanding Christmas as a holiday or understanding each other, because what it does is it sort of sets people up in this antagonistic kind of thing. And so we'll think about this for just a minute. I always think of the Starbucks cup as a great example of this. So, but I want to tell you a little story first. When my brother and I were little, this is, family legend in our family. My parents give us a hard time about it to this day. We got in a fight over McDonald's French fry wrapper. And, I maintained that it was important, who owns that French fry wrapper, because we were gonna play with it in the sandbox and make little sandcastles. That's what I recall about it anyway. But apparently we were in this huge fight, and our parents still think this is hilarious that we fought over a McDonald's French fry wrapper. And I kind of think sometimes that maybe that's how God feels about us when we get in fights about things like a Starbucks cup. Like it's like a few years ago there was a controversy, and I don't remember every detail of it, but Starbucks was going to change their Christmas cup. Does anybody remember what the issue was? It was gonna say like Happy Holidays or something instead of Merry Christmas. Was that it?
Like a plain red.
Or it was just gonna be a plain red cup or something. People got upset. I mean, like upset. And I remember thinking, I bet this is like God's McDonald's French fry wrapper. God is like up there being like, okay, yeah, people are starving. There are all kind of things going on in the world that matter a lot more than this Starbucks cup. I can't believe they're upset about the Starbucks cup, you know. But have you seen these controversies, you know, either in popular culture or in your own life?
Sure.
If anybody wants to share, I love discussion. I don't like to sit here and just talk the whole time. I want to make it meaningful to you. So if anybody wants to share, you're welcome to. If you just want to think about it in your own head, you're also welcome to do that. Stephen, do you want to? Can you think of an example? I'll put you on the spot
I remember
there.
as a kid, you know, we used to sing, you know, more Christmas carols in school. But I had a friend who was Jewish. And he's like, why am I singing about the birth of Jesus in a public school? And his parents were kind of upset. Like, this public education. It's not a Christian nation, as much as we like to sometimes think it is. It never was, never intended to be. I did a class on that too. But it's like, why can't we just sing the more cultural Christmas instead of making these non-Christians sing about Jesus, where you don't have a choice because it's a public school? I remember that early on as a child, and I had a good friend who was Jewish. It's like, we don't get to sing any Hanukkah songs. That's my holiday. And aren't Christians, you know, come from Jewish? Shouldn't you honor that too? Aren't we part of the same family of God? And you can't let me sing a Hanukkah song, but I have to sing your song? How is that fair? How is that being a good Christian?
I will say we did sing a Hanukkah song in my elementary school.
Good for you. We did not. We didn't even get to play dreidel.
But like, my sister wanted the same, everything the same way every year.
Mm-hmm.
And being the nature of who I am, I tended to introduce chaos everywhere. And that was certainly true with the different decorations and things. So I think there are those of us who need that structure and those of us who kind of enjoy messing with it.
That's true as well.
Yeah, my sister would have a rule, even when we were out from college and everything else, you had to sit in the exact same seat in the living room to open your presents. You had assigned seats. And if you moved from that, Christmas was ruined.
Yeah.
Anyone else you've seen these kind of controversies? Sometimes from the church side, it's, you shouldn't have. I know people get really, really upset every year on my Facebook. Pastors who say you cannot have a Christmas tree in your sanctuary. They get very upset about that, and how that is, you're a bad Christian if you have a Christmas tree anywhere in your church, because that's pagan. So you have that side of it.
That's a good example. Can I interrupt you just for a
Yes.
second? Okay, that's the Christmas tree. We don't have one at Derry. And I kind of wish we did, because I always really loved the Christmas tree at previous churches.
Do you know what a Christmas tree is?
So I'm about to say.
I was making sure. Just define the
Okay,
terms.
I know. Okay, so the Christmas tree is, it's a Christmas tree in the sanctuary, decorated with Christian symbols, decorated, and usually in white and gold. It's like everything is white and gold. I always really liked it. It kind of started just in, I believe the 70s. It's very recent. But that's another example of taking something and Christianizing it and be like, well, you know what? We all really like having these trees, and they're pretty. And we really want to have an argument for why we can have it. Let's put this up in our sanctuary, but it'll have the Christian symbols on it. So we Christianized it. So that's a good example. Sorry, I interrupted you. You
I have a
interrupted me.
question on that.
Yeah.
Why don't we have a tree in our sanctuary?
It's a good question.
Oh, I'm we just
I
like
don't
to
know.
have. I was wondering
The,
that.
the decorating since I've been here, long before have it. I
This is just
think long
tradition that
ago,
they
because there
have.
are pictures of the sanctuary that had 2 trees. I pitched an idea a couple years ago of getting these like wood laser cut Christmas and having a big thing where we all painted and then we could put them up on a Christmas tree in the sanctuary. Part of the reason is our sanctuary, I'm not sure where it would go, just because the booths, you can put them in the go-go booths there, we call them, to the side. Sometimes you have the puppets there, and you have
Yeah.
to move them, all of that. So we have them elsewhere, but yeah, just for whatever reason, the past probably 15 years, I think the last time I saw a picture was before the sanctuary renovation. So yeah. But you can always, tell building and grounds, we would like a Christmas tree. I like Christmas trees.
I like Christmas trees.
You want to start a revolution, come talk to me.
But yeah, it would be interesting to see among the church how many people would like the Christmas tree, Christmas or Christmas, whatever. Which one, everyone you had, because we've had trees in there. Some just have trees without the Christmas ornaments. Some people like different decorations. A couple years ago we had these hanging balls in the sanctuary. Some people loved those, some people hated those.
Everybody always has an opinion.
Everybody
Usually a
has an
strong
opinion
opinion.
on different things. We have the Moravian stars sometimes, and wreaths. Different people think, oh, well, we can have that, not this. So it's even in a church, a lot of people have different opinions about what is okay, what is not okay, and then what they just like and don't like.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I wasn't really expecting it. I just wondered if there was no reason, because people all have different.
There isn't any kind of real reason I know of.
Okay.
So, but think about this, as you go through this Christmas season, think about where you see these controversies, because I guarantee you they will pop up, because they always do, inevitably. It's like we have to pull it out every year and argue about it.
I saw one yesterday,
Oh, did you?
Hershey on Facebook, a Hershey Kiss thing, and it had a holiday countdown. And some people are like, well, why isn't it an Advent countdown? It's a holiday countdown. Well, because even a lot of Christians don't actually celebrate Advent. It's more liturgical, so a lot of Christians don't know what Advent is. So it's a holiday countdown. It's easy to do. Part of these, they can create one thing, and it starts from December 1st to 25th, because Advent changes every year. This year, we're starting November 27th. So it's harder to market, because even like the Hershey's wooden Advent calendar I have is only a 25-day one. Because Advent, you don't know how many days it is because of how Christmas and all these things flow. So marketing is very hard to market Advent. So they call it a holiday countdown sometimes.
And this is one thing I want us to think about, like, as opposed to the controversy, is there another, perhaps more useful way to approach those pre-Christian origins, rather than having these fights and fusses with each other every year about, and the confusion about where things come from and where we want them to have come from and how we squeeze them in.
We so often talk about the war on Christmas, or like keep Christ in Christmas. And so sometimes you have the Christian side saying, oh, keep Christ in Christmas. But then you might have another Christian side saying, okay, if you want to do that, well then here's what you actually do. Get rid of all this fun stuff you like, and start taking care of the poor and housing the homeless and all of that. Then the other group's like, whoa, we just meant use the word Christmas and sing the Christmas songs. We don't actually want to do what Jesus said and get rid of our trees and our lights and everything.
Going too far.
So yeah, it's that 360, because you can say keep Christ in Christmas, but what does that actually mean? Does that mean chunk all this stuff out that people like? But what if Christ is in that too? We'll talk about that more. But it's not so. We too often like binaries, one or the other, and rarely is the world set up in binaries.
So what Forbes says, what I see here is the common humanity of the different groups. All of us, whatever our religion or culture or historical era, have similar needs as human beings to cope with seasonal changes. All of us share a common human impulse to celebrate and survive, to search for joy and meaning in the middle of winter.
cocoa.
That's part of it. Food. Okay, so we talked about that 3-layer cake back at the beginning. And again, Stephen, it's not a real cake.
It'd be
It's
delicious
just
if it were.
a metaphor. But today we've talked about the first layer of that 3-layer cake, which is the seasonal celebrations and the seasonal elements of Christmas and why we have these things at this time of year. So, let's see, next week, we're going to talk about the second layer, the religious or national meaning. And that's going to be on Christmas in the early church a little bit. So that's what we'll be looking at next week. Stephen, would you like to talk a little bit more about sort of what we were talking about here? I'd love if we could go back. If we could go back and kind of have a discussion about your experiences, about what your reactions to what we talked about this morning, how this will maybe affect how you approach Christmas this year. Because as we talked about at the beginning, the big question we want to ask is like, so what? Like, why are we learning this? Like, why does it matter? What difference does it make? Because I certainly very strongly believe that an understanding of history affects us today. So what are your thoughts? I'm going to turn it over to Stephen a little bit for that. So I'll switch places with you if you want.
Okay. So as you think about, like, I love Christmas in all its forms. I love the church liturgy and Advent and the hymns. I like the Advent hymns. I don't like jumping straight to the Christmas hymns. I love those, but you have to be in the waiting of it too, in the preparation, the joy of coming. I love Christmas Eve, and even some of our, what's your favorite part about Christmas Eve service? I know your answer, but tell me anyway. What's your favorite part about every year's Christmas Eve service?
The candles.
The candles.
Candles and Silent Night, right? I mean, Silent Night's a pretty new hymn in the grand scheme of things. Like, in a lot of ways, you'd think if the church didn't have candles and Silent Night, Jesus would not show up. But, again, candles, the light comes from more the pagan stuff. Silent Night, a newer hymn. It's not rooted in historical church, but we love it. It has meaning. I think, how many people ever come to an engaged worship service on a Saturday night? Yeah, a bunch of people. Some people at first like, how can you have a service about Billy Joel in a church? Or Elton John coming up in February, if you like Elton John, or the Beatles. And I've always said is, if we believe all truth is God's truth, you can find God in the truth of a lot of these songs. You can bring up a Beatles song and find where is the spiritual dimension, find where God is present. And it's not a bad thing. You don't have to divide the world into here's sacred Christian stuff and here's everything else we can't touch. No, God is the creator of the world, creator of all music and light and everything else. You can find ways to celebrate God in all of this. And so even with these Christmas traditions that come from all over the world and get added in, it doesn't make you a bad Christian to enjoy that and find meaning in it and find joy in it and find connection in it. Can you think of one way you have built a meaningful memory or connection around something related to Christmas that isn't super Christian, that doesn't come biblical? Maybe it's a memory of cutting a family Christmas tree down.
Well, I think you said earlier that really none of Christmas is biblical, not even the Christian part.
No.
So, kind of by default, anything.
I mean, even
Any
the things we
Christmas memory
think
you
about
have.
as biblical, like, the stable, well, it wasn't really stable. All the nativity scenes we have are pretty much not real. So all of this stuff. But can you think of something that really might be more cultural, pagan Christmas that has still been really meaningful to your celebration of the holiday, of winter, of joy, of meaning?
Reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas on Christmas Eve with your family, as well as the scripture.
Yeah, it's a great poem. And it's not a Christian poem, but it still can bring anticipation and and meaning and joy and connection and family, and those are good things. Other thoughts?
I'll just share this one, since Arlene did that. My family gets together for Christmas Eve, and we always watch Christmas Vacation.
Classic.
Always. And we laugh before it happens. And we know, and some of the memories that have just come from that, my father, who had selective hearing, would be laughing before the saying was, so we knew that he knew what was going on. So that's just a very classic thing that we still continue to do.
Absolutely. I remember you told me that a couple years ago when I showed a clip of the lights in church. Now, did I get in trouble for showing a Christmas Vacation trip in church by some people? Yes. Did other people love it? Yes. And again, it goes with my theory. You can have these other elements and learn from it. Use it to connect the world around you, because all of this is swirling in this Christmas soup. And you can pick out from it and say, here's where we can find joy and meaning, and even shed light on the biblical Christmas story through Chevy Chase having trouble lighting his house. Any other examples?
Your kids, you almost have to go out and find a Santa Claus in a store so your kids can sit on the lap and tell them what they want.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you get in trouble if you don't. Like Santa Claus is a great example of, that's, I'll talk about that later too, but it's a mix of pagan and Christian and popular culture. It's all three layers of the cake smushed into one. It's like some people, when you go to a wedding, have 3 different flavors and you choose which flavor you want. I go with all of them. And sometimes when you eat them all together, the flavors complement makes it better. Santa is a great mix of that. We'll talk about more of that later. We'll have a Santa warning for kids and stuff. But that's a good example of everything mixed in together. And I love Santa. I mean, I have tons of Santa ornaments and things. I think it's kind of the epitome of so much of what the season means on all 3 levels, layers of that cake. Later.
My wife made Christmas cookies with her daughter and now with her granddaughters, who are now 10. My contribution is to clean up.
That's an important contribution. I usually end up cleaning up.
Yeah, that is an important contribution.
And so, like, cookies are another example of, not particularly Christian, but sometimes we make certain cookie cutters. Sometimes we'll have a Santa cutter, or a candle, or a tree.
Gingerbread man.
But sometimes you might have, a star or something else. So again, it's like the Christmas tree, finding ways to make those cookies more
Make
Christian.
those cookies Christian.
Make those Christian. Make those delicious cookies. But yeah, people love, we're having a cookie walk on Saturday. There's nothing super Christian, biblical, whatever about a cookie walk. But is it fun? Is it delicious? Can we then use the proceeds for mission? Yes. So again, all of these things are okay. The problem is when you start having these fights with each other, you can start picking apart everything we do, and there's nothing left. And no one has any fun at Christmas. And we don't want to have that. Because all of this can end up being good and meaningful and joy-bringing. And if you do it wrong, it can end up being hurtful. If you do Christmas in a way that excludes others, that's no good. If you find ways to take all this in and enjoy it together, it can be that warming, light, joy, hope, peace, love-filled time of year.
Yeah, can I just talk about cookies for a minute?
Yeah.
So yeah, something to think about. A lot of times this time of year, we'll see the whole thing with, like, people are like, oh, how much weight are you going to gain over Christmas, right? I think we see that a little bit less now that we've become a little bit conscious about how harmful that can be for folks. But that comes sort of from these pre-Christian roots that we're talking about as well, because it is natural at this time of year when, for much of human history, starvation was on the table, like, for everybody. Like, if you have a bad crop failure, if you can't preserve the food very well, so it makes sense. It makes biological health sense to want to eat these highly caloric foods
I'll remind you
in
that
the
next
winter.
time I bring Chick-fil-A home.
You do that all year though.
Starvation.
So that's something like you would want to do that. You would want it. You would want a feast. You would want. It's not just because like, hey, I want to pig out. It's, you know, it's a survival issue where you're thinking like, okay, it's like Fat Bear Week. You know, you gotta put on the pounds ahead of winter, ahead of the starving time.
When your grandkids ask for 2 kids, you say, sure, go for it.
What?
When your grandkids ask for 2 cookies.
You said 2 kids.
Okay, don't.
Your grandkids ask for 2. That doesn't make any sense. Are you talking about goats? I mean,
Yeah,
like,
well,
I don't know.
baby goats are delightful.
Maybe so.
Yeah, go eat the cookies.
One thing I would contribute to as something that's been really meaningful for me, and is A Christmas Carol. I have been reading that book annually since I was probably Verity's age. And it's shaped so much of what I believe and so much of how I think about not only Christmas, but about our obligations to each other as people. Dickens, in fact, called it the Carol philosophy, which is this idea that we should care for one another and we should share from our bounty and all of that. And that's been a really important thing to me. It's you see in the academic world, you'll see a bit of a fight over A Christmas Carol about whether or not it is a Christian story and whether or not Dickens himself was actually Christian as opposed to, just being culturally Christian in that mid-Victorian era. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the next couple weeks. But yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's a story about redemption.
So if you're more interested in that, you can jump in on the Monday GIF group, 11 a.m. Maybe one year I'll do an Advent series on the 4 ghosts of Christmas with Marley and the 3 things and how it ties into different kind of memories, ghosts of the biblical story as well. Have to be like 2025 though, so I already got the next couple.
Any other thoughts, reflections, things you feel like you got out of this or that you're going to take with you as you celebrate your holiday this year?
Just remember, all of it comes from multiple centuries and ages, whether it's the date of Christmas being the 25th and how, Christians have also tried to make a case why that was always the day of Jesus' birth. Going back, like, okay, well, we think that, Gabriel announced to Mary on this day, because there's a tradition that Jesus would, die and be conceived on the same day, and then if you kind of do 9 months back from that, it'd be Christmas December 25th, and it's a bunch of weird math and stuff, but they would find a way to make it
fit.
Make
It's like
it
the
fit.
Cinderella shoe with the stepsisters. That's what it makes me think
cut
of.
off your toes, stuff your foot in there. So you have all that trying to say, hey, Jesus was actually, born on December 25th, even though most evidence suggests probably not, and the likelihood is very low. Sometimes you just pick a day. It's kind of like when I went to Israel, I didn't really enjoy places like the Bethlehem church where Jesus supposedly, was born. Because they had this giant church and this little cave underneath and this thing, Jesus born on this spot. Really? Really? And you can't even see it because it's so built up. But sometimes you just need a place to say, that attach meaning to. Sometimes you just need a date to attach a meaning to. So was Jesus really crucified right on this spot? Probably not. But it's nice to have a spot of remembrance. Just like sometimes with loved ones from war, you don't have a body to bury, but you still have a grave because you need that place, that symbol. And so December 25th became the place, the temporal place of celebrating Jesus' birth. And that's important to add sometimes.
As we're winding up here in just a couple minutes. So next week, come hang out with us, Christmas in the early church, that second layer of the cake. And then this is my shameless plug for my website. I've written this new ebook called The Home Historian's Handbook, which can help you think about history and how we think like historians. And so if you're interested in that, go to my website and check it out. And that's it. Do you have any closing thoughts, Stephen?
No, I gotta go to church.
I know,
All
he's a busy man.
See you next week. Early church, we'll learn about Origen and Augustine and when the first reference to Christmas was. And you remember a few years ago, I did a series where we really talked about how, like, a lot of the things we think about being early church Christmas was before that actually Roman Empire, Caesar Augustus stuff. Even the season of Advent wasn't church to begin with, it was Roman Empire and Augustus. So even when, again, these battles, if you start going too deep, even most of the things we think of as being pure Christian biblical were actually Roman Empire before that. So you gotta be careful how much you're willing to scrape away, because you may be left with nothing. But it's kind of, with the evolution of the things, you can believe God works through all these things to create meaning and beauty. I think it's often more impressive to be able to have all this come together in something meaningful than just say, boom, there it is. That's not interesting to me. But to work through systems and people over generations to create something that is lasting and meaningful, that is much more of a miracle than snapping your fingers and creating something. All right, we'll see you next week. Go to church.